Vladimir Putin is set to stay in power for another 6 years. Given his high popularity in the run-up to the election and amid international controversy, the outcome is not unexpected. But how is he perceived, especially in the eyes of young Russian voters? What has been done to boost political engagement, especially among the young people? With me today is Professor Valery Fedorov, Director General of the All-Russian Public Opinion Research Center, the oldest and the leading marketing and opinion research company in the post-Soviet space. It is also one of the most quoted opinion polls during the presidential campaign. Welcome to the show, Professor Fedorov. First of all, this exit poll that your center has been organizing is very interesting. What do you think is the significance of the exit poll?
First time we made our exit poll 25 years ago. It was the first Russian exit poll. And since that time, every election, CGTN realized such project. And this time on presidential election we made exit poll too, and near 2,500 our employers now in 68 regions of Russia work with our respondents. And the significance of this exit poll is to know the real, clear results of all people elections and to inform our country and all over the world what are these results.
How do you see the effort by your center to make sure that the results are credible, neutral, authoritative?
This time we use a new technology, blockchain, to clear the result and to inform our audience that all results from first time and to the last are not falsificated, are not
hacked into, maybe.
Yes. This very new technology, and this is a very interesting experience for us too. And if this experience will be successful, I hope we realize a new project, so-called digital CGTN. That's why we will modify all our research projects on the blockchain platform.
What kind of patterns have you shown from the results that became very apparent since the first hours of this digital exit poll project? For instance, what I have noticed are the huge disparity between the number of young people who have voted and the number of middle-aged, even senior citizens who have voted, and the contrast is very big. Is that within your expectation? And if so, what can explain that?
The most active part of Russian electors are electors in age after 45. As for youth, only 50 or 55% of this age group are supposed to use his role to vote. And as for the results of our exit poll, this rule, this specifics of our voting is clear. The main reason of this is that our youth is not interested in politics. They are interested in music, in professional career, in movie and so on. And as for oldest part of our electors. They're interested in politics, in media, in all over the world. They are the main audience of our TV, and that's why they are the most active part of our electorate.
However, President Putin also enjoys very high popularity, supposedly, among the young people. How do you explain this? So, on the one hand, young people are not so interested in politics. On the other hand, they also have overwhelming support for President Putin. How do you explain these two?
President Putin is the most popular figure in the oldest part of our electorate. And as for youngest part of our electorate, he is the only well-known politician. And maybe Ksenia Sobchak, the new candidate, has great popularity, but this popularity with a minus, because she's not a politician, she's a media figure, first of all. And as for Putin's popularity in the youngest part of electorate, he's the strongest politician in Russia, and he's willing to make Russia great, to make Russia strong, is the first key to understanding of his popularity with youth. Because our youth is very patriotic youth, and everybody want for Russia to be strong, and maybe one of the strongest country all over the world.
There have been measures put forward by President Putin to encourage people to turn out and vote. However, it seems that these have not worked with the young people. How do you explain that?
Last year, President Putin talked to youth maybe weekly. He take part in the International Festival of Democratic Youth and Students in Sochi last October. He took part in a new project called New Leaders for Russia. It's about social lifts and about widening possibilities for young people to take part in state governance in Russia. This year in Russia is the year of volunteer, and volunteers in our country are first of all young people. Mr. Putin is not leader only for the oldest Russians. He is really leader of the youngest Russians too.
How do you explain the phenomenon that the approval rating for President Putin is high, however, reportedly the approval rating for the Russian government is relatively low?
As for Russian constitution, the main competence of president is foreign affairs and national security. Now Russia is in a huge conflict with the West. First of all with US and last time with Great Britain, as you know. That's why the topic of national security is very important for our voters. And Mr. Putin is a symbol of Russian independence, of Russian sovereignty, and of Russian strength. That's why the first reason of Putin's huge popularity is his role to defend Russia from foreign influence.
But he also set out the goal of developing prosperity back home. How big do you think this challenge will be in the next 6 years?
Last 3 years we have economical crisis, numerous economical crises in Russia, but last year we had small growth, near 1.5% of GDP, and now we have a new ambitious economical program, and our aim to modernize our economy to become Russia digital Russia. We have special program Digital Economy, and this is an initiative of President Putin, and we hope that this program will be realized in the next 5 or 6 years.
Concerning the opinion poll and the results that we have seen, for instance, the indicators doesn't look really very good. For instance, the social development indices that was published in January 2018, there were altogether 6 different indices, and among them 5 of them had red arrows, meaning going down, including satisfaction with life, social optimism, economic situation in the country, political situation, general vector of development. The only thing that is pointing up is a financial state. Do you think this is reflecting a true picture of the country's socio-economic development? How much of a challenge does this signify for President Putin in the next 6 years?
Now Russians are hoping for prosperity and for economical development, first of all, because our crisis is finished, and now the new stage of economical development is becoming. And the 3 main problems which Russians are seeing with presidential election in this March are, first of all, more money for employers.
More money.
We need more money for employers. The second problem is the problem with health system, and the second, and the third problem is the problem with education system. These 3 problems must be decided by the new president.
What is the biggest aspiration for the Russian people? Aspiration, what they look for the most, what they hope for the most, according to your study?
We are waiting for economical growth and for growth of our income. And we also need peace, and we want to end the conflict with the West. But if this conflict will not be ended, we need strong defense and strong national security.
Thank you very much. And you have been watching The Point with me, Li Xin, coming to you from Moscow, and I have been talking to Professor Valery Fedorov, Director General of the All-Russian Public Research Center. Stay with CGTN. Welcome back to the second half of today's edition of The Point with me, Li Xin, coming to you from Moscow, Russia. And my guest is Alexei Chekhonkov, Chief Executive Officer of the Far East and Baikal Region Development Fund. Mr. Chekhonkov, thank you very much for accepting our interview.
Thank you.
First of all, explain a little bit what this development fund is and what do you do?
The President of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, proclaimed the development of the Russian Far East the national priority for the whole 21st century. We are almost half the country, 42% of our territories, more than 8 million square kilometers, very sparsely populated. Only 8 million people live there, with vast treasures of natural resources such as gold, copper, hydrocarbons, coal, agricultural land, water, and this is where Russia faces the Pacific, the most dynamic economic engine of the world, and the longest land border we have with China. It's 4,000 kilometers overland. So we try to bring prosperity, we try to bring faster growth to these areas, and my job is to attract first-class investors into priority investment projects. All the projects that our fund does go through the approval process by the Russian government. get approved by the government commission, chaired by the Prime Minister of Russia, and we do two roles. Number one, we are an investor. We invest our own capital into priority projects. We provide subsidized loans to priority projects. And number two, we are the advisor, both to the government and to projects, to foreign and Russian investors who are willing to engage in those projects.
In terms of investment, in terms of economic cooperation with China, how do you see the speed or the scale changing in the past couple of years, especially since the Belt and Road Initiative has been announced?
The dynamic is positive. I've been engaged in Russia-China economic cooperation for quite a while. I before was a responsible officer in our state sovereign wealth fund for setting up the $2 billion Russia-China investment fund with China Investment Corporation. And I have to admit that before, a lot of focus was on natural resource projects, specifically on hydrocarbon projects. This didn't go away. It still is a very large focus, and energy obviously is a key interest where China has a long-term interest and cooperation initiatives with Russia. But a lot more mid-size businesses and a lot more construction infrastructure development businesses are coming to Russia and are seeking to implement opportunities, to pursue opportunities, implement investment projects, especially since President Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative. So we have, you know, the list of about 70 projects, the list of priority Russia-China projects, which Deputy Prime Ministers Shuvalov and Zhang Gaoli were working on for our governments. Our fund contributed a couple of projects to that list, and I have to say that the progress on most of those projects accelerated upon announcement of the Belt and Road Initiative by President Xi Jinping. At the same time, I would say that a lot more closings, we would like to see a lot more deals actually coming to fruition, to realization.
Why has it taken so long for many of these deals to come to fruition? Is there some kind of hesitation? Is it because of technical reasons? What are the main reasons?
I would cite cyclicality. Still, a lot of those projects, they do concern natural resources and the natural resource cycle. So the cycle was, honestly speaking, downward for the past 8 to 7 years. For the past couple of years, I think what we see is the world economy started growing back again. The growth is pretty robust, and a lot of the projects that did not look so appealing to the investors in 2010, 2012, they start looking more appealing now. Also, interest rates in Russia went down dramatically. Our central bank rate now is historical low at 7.5%, so the cost of capital in Russia has never been so low, which makes, again, all the projects are much more competitive. So I think money speaks, you know. I think the attractiveness of Russian investment landscape has never been so obvious.
Policy coordination, which has been a priority for the Chinese government and the Russian government in terms of tapping into the potential of the Belt and Road Initiative and with Russia's development initiatives such as the EEU, the Eurasian Economic Union. What kind of work is being done in your region in this regard?
I think what we look at is integration of integrations. It's a little bit of a derivative, but let's face it, Russian economy is quite deeply and very specifically integrated with the economies of our former fellow republics of the Soviet Union. So when Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia and Kyrgyzstan form this union is not an empty political construction. It's actually a very live, close body built on 70 years of joint statehood. Of course, we have economic links, we have enterprises who have been cooperating for decades. So we have infrastructure, crucial infrastructure that is integrated. So in this respect, I think it is beneficial for the Belt and Road project to address this entity as a one counterparty, where Belt and Road goals can be achieved much faster, because Belt and Road is about one thing. Fundamentally, it's about increasing competitiveness. From the Chinese point of view, of increasing competitiveness of logistics, of the faster good flow between China and the world. We are the transit territory, both the transit territory, the source of natural resources, and potentially the area where we can jointly do things like grow food. We invested in a large agricultural business that is 20 kilometers away from China, in the cleanest possibly area of Russia, where there is no heavy industry, where there is no pollution, where air and water and everything is super clean. Of course, this is a perfect Belt and Road example where we can be mutually complementary.
Has there been problems, however, that need to be addressed in the future, in your eyes, in terms of further tapping into the initiative of the Belt and Road Initiative?
I think all the problems, they originate in the head, and they get solved first in the head. They have to be solved in the head.
Examples?
The biggest example is, I think, the hype and the expectations about the Belt and Road. Belt and Road is not something that will happen in 2 years and we will see miracles. It's a very long-term strategy for decades, where China wants to engage with the world, to be more integrated into the world economy, not only as a manufacturing center and exporter of many items, but also as investor, as owner of assets, as a partner for key infrastructure initiatives, as a partner for multilateral world economy. This doesn't happen overnight. This doesn't happen in a couple of years. So I think the level of discussion that we're having now, I'll give you an example. Two examples, actually. One is we are, hopefully we're close with a key Chinese state-owned enterprise, China Gold, to set up a joint mining fund, to jointly mine and develop precious metals deposits. In the Russian Far East, we have thousands of tons of gold and platinum. What is this? This brings to monetary stability of Russia and China and the world. We produce more gold, our national currencies become stronger, and this brings more jobs, more investment in one particular sector. The other sector is railroads. China and Russia are discussing several high-profile projects in building both high-speed railroads and modernizing existing railways to make transport of railway cargoes from China to Europe faster and cheaper. So these projects, they take years to achieve, but once done, then for many decades they serve us. We're still using the railroads built 100 years ago, you know, to go from Russia to the Far East. So what the work we do now, it will be for our children and grandchildren and children of our grandchildren.
For your region, do you potentially see a kind of risk that there is too much Chinese investment in that region, hence creating some kind of monopoly or unfair competitive environment for investors from other countries?
No, we don't think so. I think it's, you know, cyclical. Sometime when a nation has been growing for a long time with a very fast growth rate, some other countries, the recipients of investment, develop fears. We saw it in the 80s when the United States feared Japan, that Japan would buy everything. Now, sometimes Chinese investment abroad is not always, you know, met with the red carpet. But I think it's all cyclical, because there is a natural balance of things. Every nation feels most comfortable and most resourceful at home. So East and West, home is best. So China will always be investing mostly in China and developing business in China. Similarly, Russia will always be strongest at home. But again, we live in a very integrated world. Everything that we have to produce, you know, a cell phone, to produce a cell phone, you have to produce rare earth metals in Russia. It's designed in the United States, it's produced in China, and some European company would market it. So it's a global, the economy is a global phenomenon. So our attitude, our approach is to use this. That's why Russian government instilled this new regime of Port of Rankov, free port in Vladivostok, where for the first time in history we grant electronic visas People can come to Vladivostok using electronic visas. They don't have to apply to the consulate. Already 10,000 people, it's just started, but already 10,000 people entered using this new mechanism to make it a new melting pot, you know, to make it a new center for international cooperation. So there is no fear that one country or one nation will take some sort of monopoly to the, you know, to the loss of the host nation. We think it's going to be a win-win.
Looking ahead for the next couple of years, what kind of expectations do you have as the two countries continue to foster a very strong partnership, and what challenges, or what's your next priority in your work?
Our priority is to close those spectacular deals, to make happen those spectacular projects we've been working for the past couple of years. We want to launch joint investment funds. We will launch the joint mining investment fund. We've done work, and I hope we will launch the joint fund to invest in agriculture, because, as I said, we have the cleanest, the most positive areas for agriculture in the world, and a 4,000 kilometer with China, where the demand is clean water and clean land. We will develop jointly, we will develop a lot of new real estate for the businesses of Russia and China and Asia Pacific broader in our Far East. We will jointly develop all those spectacular resources that have been discovered in the past 50 years in the Russian Far East. So I'm an extreme optimist in this respect, because I think timing is right. We have everything, you know, stable leadership, financial resources, technologies. There is no obstacles. Energy is changing. You know, the world is going towards cleaner energy. Again, good for Russia and China. And ultimately, we will have a much more integrated logistical systems, because China still is mostly a maritime nation. So China exports and imports most of what it has, what it produces and what it consumes by sea, which has its own bottlenecks, quite literally. The Malacca Strait cannot cope with the number of vessels that try to squeeze through it. So you'll see a lot more Northern Sea Route utilized, which is part of the Belt and Road, and you'll see a lot more railways, new railways, through Russia.
Speaking of the Northern Sea Route, what kind of prospect are you looking for the so-called Belt and Road on ice?
Well, the ice is melting, as we all know. It's quite...
on ice,
yeah.
the Northern Belt and Road.
So, no, I mean it is positive for the Northern Sea Road. The cargo turnover tripled to 8 million tons a year last year in the past couple of years. So Northern Sea Road is in demand. Russia is investing a lot in upgrading infrastructure for navigation, for safety. So Northern Sea Road is going to be really an economically competitive itinerary, not only for special cargoes, like it has been the past few years. Mostly special cargoes would go. LNG would go, some special vessels, but for regular container lines, because it cuts the length of the route from Shanghai to Rotterdam by 30%, and this is real money. So I am sure in the next 10 years we will see a lot more activity, maybe up to 5 times more. We will definitely reach tens of millions of tons of cargo transported through the Northern Sea Route.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alexei Chekunkov, Chief Executive Officer of the Far East and Baikal Region Development Fund.
Thank you.
And that is it for this edition of The Point, with me, Liu Xin, coming to you from Moscow, Russia. As always, follow us on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with our notes. Download the application